The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to today's webinar entitled Modernizing the Facility Plan Room. My name is Billy Zadig, Manager Special Projects for APA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to the APA webpage later this afternoon. Please visit the APA website for archived webinars that are available to everyone for continuing education credits recognized by local, state, and federal professional entities. Professional continuing education credits and AIA-CLU certificates are being offered for today's program. If you are an AIA professional, please send an email to me at Billie, B-I-L-L-I-E, at APA.org, along with your AIA membership number if you've not done so in the past. Those who indicated they wanted a certificate at registration and meet the requirements will receive their certificates later this afternoon. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your questions in the chat box and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by our presenter. If you are just calling in, make sure you send me an email at billie@apa.org so I can send you a certificate if you would like one. The system only recognizes you if you log in. I will rejoin you after the Q&A session. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Vivica Williams. Vivica, take it away.
Thank you so much, Billie. Hi, everyone. I am Vivica Williams. I have owned a document management and scanning company for the past 16 years. We specialize in organizing and digitizing facility documents. And so I wanted to talk to you today about modernizing the facilities plan room. So the facilities plan room for many, many years has been a mess and people have been struggling with them. It's, as I say on the quote here, it's hard to know where you're going when you don't know where you've been. Facilities documents are a little bit different than almost every other documents that an organization generates. These documents have to be kept for life, or at least the life of the building or the piece of equipment that it could deal with. So that means that facility managers are dealing with decades of accumulated documents that are extremely difficult to keep organized and updated. And new staff often have trouble finding the information they need because it's buried somewhere in the plan room and they can't find it. So many people are dealing with a problem that looks like what I'm going to show you. This was a land that it worked by hand. It was the dream of an old man. There was a room that was filled with love. It was a love that I was proud of. So you get the gist, right? I mean, everybody is dealing with these plan rooms that are a mess. It's a big problem. It's a paper problem. And today, in today's world, people don't want to deal with the paper anymore. Paper has become inaccessible. It takes up too much space. It's difficult to find what you need in an emergency situation when you need to find something fast. It's expensive to maintain. And often you only have one copy of that very important document. And, you know, it's at risk. So some of the problems that paper cause is, you know, when you need to get to something in an emergency situation, you might not have time to drive across campus to the plan room and rummage through the files to find what you need. You need to be able to get to your information wherever you are, wherever the problem exists, without having to go anywhere. You need to have it at your fingertips. Often you're missing information, really critical information, and you just can't find it. It could be right there in the plan room, but good luck finding it if your plan room is in disarray. It also causes a problem between different departments, like say your maintenance department and your construction department, right? Maybe somebody grabbed a set of plans for an upcoming renovation, and now the plans are no longer available because nobody knew where they went and they're lost. It causes poor communication, poor collaboration, because people can't all access the information. It could damage relationships with your clients, or say your university, the students. If something happens and you cannot solve that problem quickly because you can't find the document to lead you to how to answer the question, people get mad. Also, new employees can't find what they need, so they have a hard time doing their jobs because they just cannot find the documents to solve the problems. And then additionally, retention policies are difficult to maintain. So certain documents that you have, you might be able to get rid of after a certain amount of time. But if they're not well labeled, if they're not marked, those documents just sit in a storeroom and they keep growing because they're not purged, and you don't get rid of information when their retention period's up. So as we all know, COVID changed just about everything, but it has been a huge catalyst in the world of document management. With people working remotely, people becoming absolutely reliant on the computer, it has forced digital transformations for everyone. And paper became obsolete almost overnight. When people can't go into the office, they can't access their paper, and that paper becomes irrelevant. And, it has caused a huge shift in mentality, and everybody is wanting to get all of their information digitized and at their fingertips. Thank you, COVID. It's become a need. It used to be digitizing was a wish list item, but now it's actually becoming a need, and people are having to budget for it and plan for it. Nowadays, everyone can sign, share, and access their documents digitally, and that is how the business world has evolved. COVID has made digital signatures an absolute norm. Webinars, here we are today. This was something that we didn't do much of before COVID. Teams and Zoom has replaced the conference room. So everybody's embracing these digital changes, and the facilities plan room needs to follow suit. There are other catalysts that cause people to actually invest in a digitization project. You never know when a disaster might strike. It could be a hurricane, it could be a flood. Let's think back a couple years ago when they had that deep freeze in Texas where all the pipes burst. Tons of paper got ruined during those events. You never know when a catastrophic fire might happen. Look at Notre Dame Cathedral. No one ever could have imagined such a thing would catch on fire. It could happen anywhere. You just never know when a disaster might strike. And if your documents are still paper, they're at risk. Another catalyst for a digitization project is you have to move those documents somewhere. You might be renovating a space or closing down the building where the documents are stored, and you actually have to move them. That's usually a huge catalyst for digitization projects because no one wants to move the paper. They just want to get it scanned and then not have to deal with the paper in their new location. So these are some of the things that can happen if your documents are not protected, right? You just never know when a flood might happen. And, you know, here's an example of some as-built drawings that the half of the sheet is just not legible because the documents got wet and moldy and gross. So you just don't want things like this to happen. Another huge reason for these digitization efforts is the Great Resignation. We've been hearing about, you know, the rate of the facilities workforce and how quickly they're retiring. And COVID, I think, just sped things up. And, you know, management change when people retire and younger staff take over, that's a huge catalyst for actually getting a digitization project accepted, funded, and done, right? The statistics that we're hearing from IFMA and other places is that 50% of the facilities workforce will retire in the next 5 to 15 years, 50%. And so that is a lot of historical knowledge and history that retires along with them, right? So if you have staff that have been working in your department for 30 years and they retire, you know, all that knowledge that they just have in their heads, they just know where the shutoff valves are, they just know where the things are hidden, right? That goes away. So the people that come in and replace them, they need to know this information. And they need to be able to access the documents that are going to tell them these things. You know, where to find the shutoff valve locations, the mechanical equipment, where can they find the as-built drawings and the renovations that have happened in the building. You know, they need to be able to access that information, and they need to be able to access it quickly by doing, say, a quick Google type search to find what they need. Because sometimes minutes are really important. If you have a pipe that bursts, you need to know where that shutoff valve is immediately. And, you know, the documents help. So why is digital access of facilities information important? Well, a lot of people need to have access to that information to do their jobs. And a list on the right is some of the people that need to have access to these: architects, engineers, planners, plumbers, electricians, HVAC techs, utilities staff, safety and security staff, risk management, IT, contractors, you name it. I mean, the list goes longer than that. So a lot of people all need to have access to the same documents. The more people who need to access the information, the more money you'll save in a digitization project, because the information will be at their fingertips. They no longer will have to go to the plan room to find what they need, or they won't have to wait to ask somebody to find the information for them. They can just find it themselves. I'm not sure who in your organizations are in charge of the plan room, but I can imagine how busy you are with people asking you to find things. This way they can do it themselves. You can respond quickly in emergencies, and you're no longer reinventing the wheel. If you have a document in your plan room that you just can't find, you might have to pay somebody to, you know, recreate that information, go out and measure the spaces, or, you know, redraw certain plans or documents, because you just can't find the information anymore. So how do you go about doing a digitization project? There are about 8 steps that are really important to think about when planning a digitization project. The first step is your project assessment. You need to figure out what documents you're going to include. And you need to gather your documents from all the sources. So you could have drawings scattered around your facility in multiple places. You need to figure out where all the drawings are hiding. Every single time we do a project, we discover so-and-so's office or a closet somewhere, or, you know, hidden places where the drawings and documents might live. So Start asking your staff, where are all the documents? Where are they located? Because sometimes you might not even know of certain, document caches, if you will. You need to understand what the volume of documents you're talking about, right? It could be such a great volume that you might want to break the project down over several years. You could break the project down by building. You're going to do buildings XYZ one year and the rest the next year. You could be breaking the project up into phases by type of document. So you might start with your drawings and then move on to all of your small format documentation, such as your O&M manuals or your construction files. There are ways to chunk up the project so that it can better meet your budget and yet still get done, right? So many people avoid these projects because they just seem too big. But if you break them down into smaller, manageable chunks, you can often get the project done. You have to think about who is going to be performing the digitization. Are you going to try and do it in-house? Are you going to have students scan your documents, or your own existing staff? Or are you going to hire a contractor to do it? And you could even have some sort of hybrid model where students assist a contractor. What's the equipment that you're going to need, right? Scanners, computers, maybe even other types of equipment depending on the documents that you have. But remember, drawings need one kind of scanner. All of your 8.5 by 11 documents need another kind of scanner. If you have microfilm, microfiche, you need another piece of equipment. So you got to keep all that in mind if you're going to be doing it yourself. And then you really need to think about, where are the electronic files going to go after they're digitized? Often so many people are so excited to get them digitized, they don't think about where this stuff's going to live afterwards. So you got to think about that right from the onset of the project. And then here's a big question: is upper management on board? Do they truly understand the importance of a project like this? Because it's not cheap, and they need to be totally on board with this so that you can get it approved. Speaking of not cheap, so you need to think about the budget. How much budget do you have to devote to a project like this? You need to be thinking about, how much will it cost to transport the document to whoever's doing the work? What are the equipment costs? If you're going to do it in-house, you need to buy equipment. What's the labor cost? The labor is the biggest part of a document management project. It just takes time to do a project like this. And people underestimate how much time it takes. And so I would say out of a scanning project, probably 3/4 of it is the labor cost alone. And then you need to think about where the documents are going to go. What's your document management system, right? There are lots of different levels and costs of document management systems, and you need to figure out where these are going to go and how much that'll cost you. Then how are you going to procure the work? Are you going to go and release an RFP? Are you going to sub it out and use an existing contract? Are you going to hire people directly to do the project? So you need to figure out how you're going to procure the work. And then how much can you afford? Think about, how much money you have to devote to a project like this. And if the project is going to be more than the funding that you have, well, you might need to break it down over a couple years. And so do your homework for the budget. I would definitely ask for some market research quotes just so that you can get an idea of cost and what the budget might cost before an RFP is released. Really do some homework. The next thing is you need to think about your retention guidelines. So you need to figure out what documents are what I call the keepers, and what documents can be discarded or shredded, right? Some documents you need to keep forever. Some documents you can get rid of after 7 to 10 years, depending on your retention schedule. I would not waste any money scanning documents that are past their retention schedules, right? If you are allowed to get rid of them, get rid of them, unless they're in the keeper list, right? What documents have to be retained? Well, drawings usually have to be retained for the life of the building, but just the latest version of that project set, the as-built if you have them, or the most recent version of that project set if the as-built have disappeared, if you will. You don't need to keep all the previous iterations of that project, right? Just the latest and greatest. And then you need to figure out, well, what are you going to do with the paper after it's been scanned? Do you keep it? Do you shred it? That's really a question that you're going to have to ask yourselves, like what to do with the paper after the scanning project. But documents that people like to keep are drawings. I mean, very rarely do we end up shredding drawings. People still like to keep the paper for those drawings. And drawings are almost always on the like to be scanned list. Other documents that people really want to keep, and despite of a retention schedule, are maybe your submittals, some important reports like surveys, geotechnical reports, hazmat reports, etc. O&M manuals are usually on the keeper list. Photos, lots of times people take photos during the construction of a building, and those photos can sometimes solve some questions, especially if they're photos of any underground utilities. You know, lots of times people want to keep their photos, and the list goes on. But these are things that you need to think about. One big way to save money is to apply retention guidelines during a scanning project. So in my experience, most plan rooms are 30 to 50% in duplications or superseded sets. So when I walk into a plan room, I am immediately assuming that 30% of those documents we can get rid of and we won't have to scan. Plus, there are a lot of electronic duplicates now too. So maybe even another third of those documents you already have electronically, and we won't have to scan them. But, you know, electronic files, everybody always thinks they have everything electronically or a lot of stuff electronically. Without fail, you have fewer documents in an electronic format than you think. And that plan room full of paper, often most of that stuff that that is not a duplicate or a superseded set has to be digitized. When we apply these retention guidelines, you know, often we can reduce the amount of scanning by up to 60%. So by reviewing the documentation before you scan it, it can take some time, but it often pays for itself in the long run because you're not scanning the junk, right? You want to scan the keepers, the good stuff, and you don't want to scan a bunch of stuff that you just won't need. All right, then you have to think about when you are choosing the contractor to do the project, how far away are they? You know, are you going to have to transport these documents to an offsite facility? If you do that, just make sure that the contractor follows really strict chain of custody procedures, right? You want to make sure that everything gets barcoded from the time that they pick up the documents to the time that they bring them back. You know, they need to be tracking what was picked up. You want to make sure that the contractor's facility is a pretty low risk to you. right? So you want to make sure that the facility is secure, that the doors remain locked at all times, that there's a security system in place, that they have good climate control in their facility, right? So you just want to make sure that the contractor that you choose to do the work takes good care of the documents while they're off-site. A big piece of any scanning project is document preparation. Staples are awful. They're evil little things that have to be manually removed whenever you're doing a scanning project. It's very labor intensive. And, you know, it takes a banker box of documents can take anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 hours to prepare for scanning, because we got to remove all these little staples. So that's where a lot of the labor costs come in. So just keep that in mind. The document scanning, you know, you're going to need these big pieces of equipment to scan drawings. The scanning equipment has come a long way in recent years, and so the quality of images is much, much better at smaller file sizes. So I always recommend, you know, if you have a really ancient old piece of equipment, to probably update it. You may need specialty scanners such as microfilm, book scanners, wide format scanners. You know, just keep in mind the documents that you have and what equipment might be needed to do the digitization project. You're also going to want to specify the image quality. You know, what is the DPI? I always recommend 300. OCR, that's optical character recognition, that allows the text within the documents to be searchable. Although OCR works great for manuals, equipment manuals, normal documents, it doesn't work great on large format drawings. So just FYI. So, you know, you just need to, if you're going to release an RFP, you need to specify the image quality. You know, using professional scanning equipment, it ends up saving you a lot of time. And so sometimes you think you can end up saving money by doing it yourselves, using your little desktop scanners, and you can tackle it yourself. Lots of times the labor and the time involved with that is too great. And it really behooves you to take it to a professional to have it done so they can get it done much faster. But, you know, you just have to weigh the way you want to do the project. Now, indexing to me is one of the most important parts of the project. Indexing allows you to search for and find your documents later once they've been digitized. And it is the process of associating or tagging documents with different terms that you can search. So it just gives you those keywords so that you can find them later. So for a drawing, examples of indexing could be the building name, the project name, the date, the issue, the sheet number, sheet title, discipline, right? And then you can search by any of those terms to find your document. You could put some of the information in a file name. So project name underscore as built underscore date, for example. But you can only fit so much information in a file name. So lots of times you're going to want to have an indexing spreadsheet that goes along with your information. Here are some common indexing fields that we capture when we do these type of projects. It's a lot of information for facilities documents, but all of this information is pretty important, such as the type of document it is, what kind of submittal type is it? Are you following master format or uniformat? What are the discipline? What's the discipline? what's the project number, project name, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. But all of this information is really important for a facilities project. Why do we capture so much information? Well, it helps users find information in a variety of ways. You can do a keyword search to just find any of the information that could be associated in a title or project name. You could be looking for a date range. You might know that that project happened in the early 2000s, but you're not sure of the exact date. Well, you can narrow down your search by a date range. You might know the architect or contractor who did the work, but you can't remember the project name. You know, these are all different ways that you can find your information and find it quickly. It helps you save time, money, and resources when you can find your information fast. And also, different people think about the documents in different ways. The electrician just wants to get straight to the electrical documents, whereas somebody in the construction office, they might need to look at the full project set, right? So people think about the documents differently. Another big piece of this big puzzle is, where do you put the files once they've been scanned, right? What's your final deliverable? Where are these things going? You know, the scanning contractor could just upload everything to a hard drive and hand it off to you and say, here are your documents. And then it's up to you to decide where they need to go. Are they going to go in the cloud? Do they need to be in an on-premise solution? Are you going to get a document management solution that's like a software as a service or SaaS solution? Or are you going to try and manage that information yourself? Are you going to put it just in, you know, a Google Drive somewhere? You got to think about where these documents are going to live. I always recommend a document management system. To me, it makes it so that it's a little bit more user-friendly. You can have more advanced search capabilities. There's some added security to a full-fledged document management system. You can audit the documents so you know who looked at the document and when. You can understand how documents are added into the system, because people sometimes have certain parameters that they need to follow in order to add in new documents. So important metadata isn't left out. And then you need to find that one of the final delivery questions is, what happens to the paper? Are you returning it? Is it getting shredded? So all of these are kind of things to think about when planning a project. So we just went over this slightly. Benefits of a cloud-based document management system. It helps you search for documents pretty quickly. You can think of a Google type search when looking for your information. You can access your information from anywhere, anytime, from any device, as long as you have internet access. It minimizes risk. So in an emergency situation, you can even give first responders access to certain documents. Often these programs can integrate with other software programs that you might already have or are investing in. And these cloud-based document management systems have lower IT costs. They're basically, you know, your IT department doesn't have to do much with them. How do you choose the correct document management system for you? I recommend seeing a lot of demos before you buy something. What you're going to be looking for is something that's user-friendly. You might have a lot of different skills of computer people in your organization, and you know, you want something that is very user-friendly and not overly complicated. You need to think about what functions do you need in a system, and what your budget is. Unfortunately, I have not found one system that does everything really well. And so most facilities departments need somewhere to put their documents. They might need a program that does space management so they can manage their spaces. They might need a software that helps them manage their assets. You'll need a work order system, maybe another system to manage compliance documents. And you might have yet another system that does construction management. I think it's okay to have more than one system to do these things, as long as each system does what they do really, really well and is user friendly. So, you know, unfortunately, we don't have like the Microsoft Office of the document management, you know, software out there yet. But until that happens, I really recommend, you know, viewing demos, spending time with a system before you buy it to make sure that it's something that you're really going to want. So again, this is just what happens to the paper, right? If you're keeping the paper, you need to make sure that you're transferring the paper securely from one person to the next. What happens to the paper afterwards? Is it going to be shredded? How long do you need to keep that document in your retention schedule? So when you digitize the documents, I would put a retention date in there saying you can discard at whatever date as part of the metadata, so that you know that you don't have to keep everything for forever. So what are some of the advantages of a digitization project? Well, I would say the return on investment is a big deal for a digitization project. 84% of businesses achieve full return on investment in less than 18 months. I mean, that's quite remarkable because some of these projects can be quite costly, but the benefits of doing a project like this, I mean, it just pays for itself over and over again. Your people can be far more productive if they have all this information at their fingertips. You can reduce cost and square footage for storing your paper documents. I mean, documents take up a lot of room, especially drawings and blueprints. They take up tons of space. And just saving that square footage can be a huge savings. A really huge part of it is risk reduction. That information does not get lost in case of a catastrophic event, like a hurricane, a flood, a fire, something happens. That information is not lost. And another big thing is, in an emergency situation, those documents are accessible at your fingertips. You know, we hate to think about active shooter situations, but getting that floor plan into the hands of first responders immediately without any delay can often save lives. So having that information at your fingertips is really critical. And another huge cost for organizations that they've been doing since the dawn of time is the printing costs, right? Once you start saving information and gathering information and keeping everything digital, you don't have to pay the printer anymore to print those sheets. You have far fewer printing costs, and that adds up. So here are some calculations. It's been found that 12.5% of every day is wasted filing, printing, and searching for documents. If somebody makes $50,000 a year, that's $6,000 per person that's wasted just looking and printing paper, right? Storage space. I'm in Maryland. Class A office space in Maryland is $31 per square foot. An average filing cabinet takes up 16 feet, because remember, you need the space for the drawers to open. That's $500 per filing cabinet that you're basically throwing down the drain, right? The printing costs, it's been estimated that every time $1 is spent on printing, another $6 is added to that cost simply for the handling, storage, and distribution of that document. So, you know, that adds up. There are other benefits for doing a document management project. You can better meet regulatory compliance needs. I don't know if you guys have hospitals on your campuses or are part of your organizations, but there are huge compliance needs in the healthcare world, particularly for facilities, and also for everyone else, right? You've got to meet those compliance needs. And having the documents digital will allow you to prove that these tests have been done very quickly and easily. It also helps everyone involved improve their communication and collaboration, which just means that everybody can work more efficiently. You no longer have to reinvent the wheel. You know if a document exists or if it does not, right? It's right there in the system, black and white. It's not hidden in plain sight in the plan room anymore. You can do a search, know if it's there. Also, security is increased. Everybody worries about, digital documents and security and so forth. I found that the cloud is actually more secure than storing documents on your server, your local server. It's also more secure because everybody has a username and password to get into the site. So nobody can access the information unless they've been given a username and password. People can also be limited to what they can do in the system, right? They may have view-only privileges, or they could have full admin rights, but they can be limited to what they can do depending on the type of login that they have. You can provide better customer service to the students on your campuses, right? If something happens, you can tackle the problem, you can answer the questions you need answered by looking at a tablet rather than driving across campus and going into the plan room to try and solve the problem. You'll make fewer errors, and that is a huge, huge benefit, right? You'll know if you're working from the most up-to-date document or not, and it really benefits everyone involved if you can make fewer errors. And I have found that employees are happier when they can just get to their information and not have to rummage through the paper plan room. Often people in the past were scared of the plan room, they wouldn't go in it, and all that information that's stored in there is virtually lost because nobody actually used it. When people don't have to struggle to find information, they're happier. And happier employees stay with you longer. So that is a huge benefit. And, it's going to be up to you to decide if your organization is ready to digitize and modernize your plan room. But I really encourage you to think carefully and don't hesitate. Make a plan. Digitize today because, it's going to have to happen sooner rather than later, and it's better to do it sooner. So I just want to say thank you so much and ask if you guys have any questions.
Vivica, we have quite a few questions that have come in. Our first question is, what about all the stuff that is not paper but digital that is stored all over the place in so many flavor of the day storage locations?
I love that question. I always feel like that needs to be part of that first step of the initial phase of the project, of the document review phase of the project, where you are gathering the documents from all the different locations. I'd like to throw everything in one bucket, electronic files along with paper files, because when we're comparing and contrasting duplicates, you could have a full electronic set of a 250-page sheet of documents that don't need to be scanned because you already have it. So that should be included in that initial review phase.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, are there consultants who can assist in the project development?
I would love to help you with that. Absolutely. I can help you. My contact information's on the screen. And yeah, it's really a great idea to get a consultant in there to help you.
Okay, our next question is, have you heard of ebuilder.net, a cloud-based management system which has documents for facilities in it?
Yes, I know eBuilder very well. eBuilder does a great job with the construction management. Where it doesn't do as good of a job is the historical documentation. It's just not very user-friendly for storing vast amounts of archived and historical documents. And so it's basically, you can keep it as a file folder structure in there, but you can't get some of the extra benefits as you can get in a full-fledged document management system.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, could they refer to the use of Uniformat as documentation standard code?
Sure. I mean, that's up to the user. Absolutely.
Are you willing to travel to Georgia?
Yes.
I'm getting quite a few of these questions, so yeah, they're just
yes.
kind of asking if you're willing to travel.
Absolutely.
I'm getting quite a few other questions that I think are better to be answered on a one-on-one with you.
Sure.
We can do that, and because they're asking for costs and all that, and I think it's better. Okay, yeah. I have another question. Have you heard of eQuorum image site?
Absolutely. I've worked with eQuorum in the past, and I am very familiar with it.
Okay. Next question. What about material samples, fabrics, wire mesh, paint chips, etc.? Are they kept on file for need to match later?
That's going to be up to you. I mean, that's the kind of document that you might want to just keep the actual physical file, because you might need to look at the texture of the carpet sample or something like that. That's going to be an individual preference of the person that is in charge of those documents.
Okay. There's another question here that says, how do you handle renaming campus buildings? Or the renaming campus buildings?
Yeah. That's always a challenge, because there are, especially in a college situation or university, buildings get renamed all the time. Somebody donates money and the building has a new name. So it is a challenge for us when we do a project like this to understand all the different past names of a building. We solve those puzzles by looking at the drawings themselves, looking at the shape of the building. Sometimes it's labeled as something and we know it's the modern name today, but on the drawings it says the old name. So we kind of figure that out. When we have questions, we go back to the source and ask the facility manager to take a look at a mystery set of drawings, because we just can't figure out what it is. But yeah, this happens all the time, past names, current names. One good solution is maybe numbering your buildings. So if the building name changes, the number might stay the same. That's always a good way to do it. But yeah.
Yeah, someone has made the comment, is if you're lucky, you have a building ID.
Yeah, there you go. See?
And someone said, campus building renaming is the time for fundraising.
Right. Exactly.
Well, it looks like we've gotten through all of the questions that we can answer here live. We have, like I said, I have several questions here that are better answered one-on-one with Viveka and the person asking the question. So Viveka will be getting your questions and she will reach out to you. So if we have no further questions that we can answer today, I'd like to thank Viveka as always, for doing a great presentation for us. And to our attendees, thank you so much for attending our first webinar of the Apple webinar season. We'll kick these off every Thursday, and every once in a while we'll have an additional Wednesday. So you'll get a follow-up email tomorrow that'll have a link where you can go and see all of the webinars we have planned out through the end of the year. So until next time, be safe, stay healthy, and please be kind to one another. Have a great week. Bye-bye now.